None of those people are the gun person.
That includes the deceased gun person.
Okay. And then separately, do you know the gun person's relationship to the school?
Not at this time, no.
If it is not a shooting that helps them push the narrative of gun control, that helps them push the narrative that the common denominator is easy access to guns or right-wing extremism, they try and bury it. Let's get to what is in the news right now, this shooting in British Columbia. Now, I was talking about this with Lane the Brain earlier, and it's weird that this didn't catch on as far as being covered by the media, where when he first read about it, and the same thing with me, I thought it might be one of those fake news stories because someone had written about it, and it was covered nowhere.
Yeah, I didn't see it anywhere. And it was later in the day, and I'm like, what's going on at night?
Right.
Like at school? What?
And then we realized that's very telling in and of itself. Why? Why was it not covered anywhere for a good long while in comparison to other shootings?
Why don't you want people to know about it right away?
Right.
Interesting.
Why did we not have the same reaction immediately from world leaders and posts? Why did we not have the same kind of reaction in comparison to other mass shootings? Now, I will say this. There was some misinformation going around where people were saying, hey, this shooter was transgender, and posting pictures of someone who was not the shooter. This shooter may be, at this point in time, seems likely that they're a transgender individual. But I will tell you, when you're facing an absence of information, look to how the left is treating it. And that'll be a pretty strong indicator. So if I go, okay, we don't have the information, but they're not covering it, they're not jumping on this, and they seem to be kind of trying to punt it a little bit. There's something there that they don't like. For example, maybe the shooter was black. Maybe the shooter was transgender, lesbian, gay. If they don't cover it, there's something there that they don't want to touch. And I saw that right away. So off the bat, for those of you who haven't been following it, shooter in British Columbia killed 9 at the time of this broadcast, injured another 25. This is a really large-scale, tragic one. Yeah. And here's the news report, so you don't take my word for it. Of course, all references available, links in the description. We do that every show.
This is one of the biggest tragedies that our province, our country, and certainly the rural town of Tumbler Ridge has ever seen.
We're still triaging other victims, and I don't have updates on whether that number could rise. The scene was very dramatic, and there were multiple victims that are still being cared for.
Okay, now I'm going to answer the question that I asked you earlier so you know where we're going with this. The reason why is if it is not a shooting that helps them push the narrative of gun control, that helps them push the narrative that the common denominator is easy access to guns or right-wing extremism, they try and bury it. This is the same media who has said that the greatest threat to, domestically is right-wing extremists or white males, as you heard Don Lemon, people like Chris Cuomo, Brian Stelter, CNN as a whole, MSNBC, I guess it's called MS now. That's what you've heard them say. That's why they don't want to touch this. So let me give you a couple of key facts, and then I'll tell you what they want you to believe, and I'll tell you what is accurate. It does seem like this shooter may have been transgender. Let me tell you why I think that's the most likely scenario. The RCMP's district commander referred not only to the shooter as a gun person, which is odd, but every part about this clip is suspicious.
None of those people are the gun person.
That includes the deceased gun person.
Okay. And then separately, do you know the gun person's relationship to the school?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. So right away, gun person, look left.
Right.
That seems odd.
They also could have just said shooter.
Right.
Which is weird.
And then when you combine that with the fact that the RCMP confirmed the initial alert about the shooting, describing the shooter as a female in a dress with brown hair, well, why wouldn't they just say the woman in question, the gun woman, gun person? Could just be that they're tripping over pronouns because they don't know what to do. Okay. There's some information. Here's some more. This comes from Cosmin. Do I say
Georgia?
Georgia. Sorry, forgive me for it's spelled DZSURDZSA. Forgive me. Juno News.
Pure Canadian.
Juno News, former post-millennial editor, wrote, I just spoke to Jesse Strang's uncle, Russell, who identified Jesse as a suspected Tumbler Ridge shooter. Russell described his nephew, Jesse, as, quote, transgender. Public YouTube account belonging to Jesse also bears the trans flag and an SKS rifle. I reached out because that's what basic journalism demands, verification through primary sources. That used to be standard practice. It was the only thing I could do while the police refused to verify basic details about the killer's identity. To be clear, this is different from the picture that was circulating from fake news accounts on the right trying to convince you that that person was the shooter. And the reason that this matters is because that's a person. And if it's not the same person, that's a problem. Remember when we released the Nashville Manifesto? You had people on the right saying, no, I did my due diligence, and my source says that Audrey Hale was sexually molested by her father. Well, the reason that that's so harmful is because there's an actual father in the real world. And if that's not true, your clickbait isn't a defense. So this is someone who did the work, seems to be legitimate. It is different from the picture that many of you have seen. Now we go to the response from the left. This is telling. The New York Times. Canada was reeling on Wednesday, a day after a shooter killed 9 people and injured 25 others in a remote town in northeastern British Columbia, the third deadliest shooting in the country's history that comes amid a wider debate about gun control. Let me be clear, there is no wider debate about gun control in Canada. It has some of the strictest gun laws in the Western world. Okay? To the point of being silly. When you talk about bureaucracy, red tape, and arbitrary laws simply designed to infringe on your right to self-defense, you're referring to Canada. There's no debate. It has been settled by a totalitarian government in Canada. Yeah. You cannot own firearms for the purposes of self-defense in Canada. And should you want to hunt, there are still stringent regulations. Just to be clear, Mark Carney wrote, I am devastated by today's horrific shootings in Tumbler Ridge, BC. My prayers and deepest condolences are with the families and friends who have lost loved ones to these horrific acts of violence. Macron chimed in, other leaders from Australia, Germany, Sweden, they had similar messages without the same widespread condemnation of easy access to guns. Again, that is telling. Look to how the left responds. Even the supreme leader of China, Xi Jinping, had this to say.
I hear about shooting in British Columbia, also known as West China, and would like to offer condolence to family and 10% discount on Chinese car. Me so sorry.
I'm really starting to hate the Chinese.
That seems inappropriate.
Yeah.
It does. So let's go to what they want you to believe are the common denominators and why the response has been different here from, let's say, a shooter who happened to be white in Texas. Common denominator number 1, okay? Guns, gun control, gun violence. And I'll just so you know, I'll foreshadow here. We're going to get to acts of terrorism and acts of mass violence that don't involve guns, and they're actually far more prevalent. But you already knew that. People who are new, this may be news to you. So the first thing they usually try and use, which they're kind of sidestepping right now, gun violence is the root of the problem. Access to guns, and it is a uniquely American problem, doesn't work here.
This epidemic of gun violence is a uniquely American problem.
When it comes to the sheer frequency and public response to mass shootings, the U.S. is in a category all its own.
A uniquely American phenomenon.
The fact that the U.S. is alone in the world for these mass shootings in schools or other places.
No advanced society except this one keeps having gun massacres.
America is the only country in the world where scenes like this play out on almost a daily basis.
Do you guys even realize that the #1 killer of children and teens are gun injuries? Why are we fighting about this?
Wrong.
Well, the reason we're fighting about this is because this country used to have a lot of men in the country, and they wanted to be able to protect you. Your father would want to protect you. Men in this country wanted to be able to protect their family, their liberty, their freedoms, to be clear. So this idea that it's settled, no. And then the idea that it's settled that only the United States faces mass shootings, that's not true. And we certainly aren't the only country that faces acts of mass violence, because here's the truth. Plenty of mass shootings have taken place in Canada. You could argue that Montreal is the founder of the feast. Where I was raised, we had 3 mass shootings. We had the École Polytechnique was a big one, Concordia University massacre, the Dawson shooting, where my friends, quite a few of them, were in that school when it happened in 2020. Nova Scotia, there was a gunman who was on a rampage for 13 hours, killing 22. 13 hours. I would argue that's a tougher pill to swallow.
Yeah.
Because imagine you are the spouse or the father of death 18 or 19 or death 21 at hour 12 and a half. Why don't we treat that as a greater act of evil than people having the right to own firearms? That is a failure of the government. It's a failure of their primary job. No one could stop that person. And that mass shooting, I guess you wouldn't call it mass shooting because it took place over the course of 13 hours, but it is, by definition. That's what led to the ban on assault-style weapons in Canada, which, by the way, if you're in the States, includes pretty much every gun that you have.
They can't define it.
Yeah, they can't define it. It includes pretty much every basic pistol that you may have. And I know you're thinking, oh, only if I have an extended magazine. Nope, if you have a standard one. In many cases, even if you had a California-compliant magazine, you still wouldn't be allowed that. And if you did, you wouldn't be allowed to load it, and you wouldn't be able to have it by your bedside. So let's just be clear about that. We don't know what gun was used yet. We do know that Canada has some of the strictest gun laws in the Western world, okay? It's not even close. I don't want to go through it. You guys can check the references. I think you all know this. By the way, we broadcast at 11 a.m. Eastern. Tune in, 11 a.m. We're always here. Common denominator number 2 here is some people will point to this, and it definitely is a trend, but it is not the common denominator. But transgender shooters, there's certainly a stronger correlation with that than there would be with some of the other arguments to be made. So since 2018, there have been at least 6 school shootings that were committed by transgender individuals. You have 2018 Aberdeen, 4 were killed at a pharmaceutical distributor. You had 2019 Highlands Ranch, Colorado, for those of you who've forgotten that. There was Colorado Springs, Colorado, at 5 were killed. That was the gay nightclub. Then there was Nashville, obviously. We covered that and released that manifesto. The local authorities tried to bury it, and the FBI, I believe, or mayor threatened to sue us. No word on that. 2024, there was Perry, Iowa. This person was gender fluid, but I consider it all part of the mentally ill pot. Killed 1, injured 5. 2025, Minneapolis. That trans shooter killed 2 and I believe injured 29. This was the recent church one. Now, you could say, all right, there seems to be a common thread there. Well, sure, but it doesn't exist in a vacuum. Would there be a reason to believe that transgender individuals are more likely to commit acts of violence, mass violence? Are they more or less likely to be mentally unstable? Well, I'll tell you, it's not even close. It's not even close. 42% of trans adults have attempted suicide. The numbers don't get better pre or post-op. The only other group of people who would have that kind of an attempted suicide rate are paranoid schizophrenics, and even then, it's probably not as high. Jews in the Holocaust, American slaves, did not have attempted suicide rates that high. I don't believe that your oppression is worse than an American slave or a Jew in the Holocaust because you couldn't take a dump in your toilet of choice at Target. 81% have thought about suicide. 56% have engaged in non-suicidal self-injury. 31% have drug abuse problems. The comorbidity rate is through the roof. Only now we don't see that because they don't list them as comorbidities, thanks to the DSM-5 in 2013, stating that gender nonconformity is not in itself a mental disorder. It was, until it wasn't. But you look at everything, nowhere else in psychiatry would you look at a group of people, say, okay, do we have a group? Is it clearly defined? Yeah. All right. Do we have some common statistics, some through lines here? Oh, wow, a 42% attempted suicide rate. Oh, wow, a 30% substance abuse rate. You couldn't look at a category of people, ADHD, bipolar, body dysmorphia, schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder. You couldn't look at those conditions and see the consistent level of contributing comorbidities or results that you see with transgender. It's the only one where we don't consider these clusters to be a notable pattern indicative of mental illness. Can you answer me? Anyone want to answer why? If you just said, hey, 42% of men attempt suicide versus women, or 42% of white men attempt suicide and have substance abuse problems, and 80% have had suicidal ideations. If you looked at any other group of people as a demographic and saw those kinds of trends, you would say this is disconcerting and would address it as a problem. This is the only one where we don't. Follow the science. Common denominator, though, I would argue, number 3, this is something... sorry, that's okay. Is mass terror in general and mass killings. This is something that we see across the world, not just the Western world. And it doesn't have to involve guns. Guys, it does not have to involve guns. We have mass mowings with cars. They occur at rates that defy reason if you look at what's happening in China. And by the way, that's taken place in the United States and Canada. But often the motivations, if they can't be attributed to simply access to guns, they're obfuscated or lied about. For example, remember the terror attack in Sydney? That was a right-wing thing.
We take Asia's advice very seriously. We work closely with them. We receive regular updates as well. The Director General of Asia has warned about a range of threats, be it anti-Semitism, the rise of right-wing extremist groups as well. And we continue to work closely with our security agencies.
Now, the reason I bring up that comparison is because, like with the transgender demographic, and this doesn't mean I have to say not all. Was it 158 million Muslims on earth believe that violence against apostates and converts is at least sometimes justified, or was it 190-something million? I'm trying to remember. It was over 150 million Muslims believe that violence against non-Muslims is sometimes justified. That would seem like it's a contributing factor. They said right wing. So acts of evil are carried out all the time. They don't necessarily involve guns. And you can see very common ideologies that are shared with those who commit acts of evil. Islam is one of them, if you're looking at global terror. And in general, leftism. You see, radical leftism. We're not just talking about murder, we're talking about assaults as well. We'll get into mental illness as well. If you're looking at the problem as an inanimate object, guns, well, that problem's been solved in Canada. You see the Democrats on the stage when they debate? They point to Canada or Australia as the success stories. And let's be honest, you're not going to see those levels of gun control in the United States. It's just not going to happen, not in your lifetime. But if the problem was guns, Canada solved it. That's not the problem. Yes.
So 198 million Muslims worldwide support the use of violence against civilian targets to defend Islam, according to Pew.
There you go. 198 million Muslims. The threat is right-wing extremism.
Didn't say that.
No.
That was an Islamic attack on a Jewish gathering that he was talking about. Didn't say it.
No, it seems like
protected group,
right-wing extremism.
Yeah.
Let's go through some other examples of evil committed, because the problem is solved in Canada with guns. Is that the problem? April, in Canada. Did you know this? 11 people were killed and a dozen more were injured in a Vancouver car attack.
Wow.
And by the way, these attacks are so prevalent in China. There's actually a weekly segment that you can watch online called the Bollard Report. As far as
on the China show,
it's called the
the China show.
It has a segment, the Bollard Report.
Bollard Report,
yeah, because mass mowings are such a regular occurrence in China that they don't know how to stop it.
I don't think that's terrorism. It's just an Asian driver.
Could be.
China does its best to hide this, too. That's why the China show, we had to reach out to them and say, hey, help us.
And so how do they want to deal? Well, in China, they're talking about installing traffic barriers to prevent car attacks.
But everywhere?
So what people used to say was a straw man, where you go, well, should we ban cars? If you don't acknowledge evil, if you don't acknowledge ideological influences, if you don't understand that good and evil exist in this world, well, you're gonna, once you ban guns, you go, well, people are still committing. I guess we'll put up traffic barriers. That's not gonna work. I guess we'll ban cars. In the UK, banning knives. It's never enough, and they ignore the root problem. And it's the same root problem that has caused Gen Z, we'll get to this, to be dumber and more mentally ill. We've now lived this social experiment. It's a failure. Period. Period. Everything the left has told you is wrong. Everything they have touched, they have ruined. Every policy they propose, every solution they present makes you worse off for having listened to them. Objectively. We even have that in the States, by the way, the mass car attacks. Remember Waukesha? You had that. There was one in Nice, France. There was one in New Orleans, Berlin. There was one in New York City. This isn't a rare occurrence. And so if you go, our problem is gun violence, well, let's just ignore all the car attacks. Our problem is gun violence, well, let's just ignore all the Islamic terrorism. Our problem is gun violence, let's just ignore the 42% attempted suicide rate with transgender individuals and their proclivity to violence. Our problem is gun violence. All right, what do you do when a story like this comes up? A transgender individual carried out a mass shooting, allegedly, in a country with the strictest gun control policy in the Western world. Well, that might indicate there's a moral rot. Let's just move on.
Yeah.
Don't let the left do that. Don't listen to them. Don't steal their narrative. Don't let them steal the narrative here. Don't let them gaslight you into this being something that it's not. Listen so that you hear their arguments, but don't even allow them the chance to propose a solution, a prescription. Period. It's always bad.
Yeah.
It always leads to more death. And it always leads to a worse society. You can't find a single example where there's not that as a clear example. And I know some people I can already hear right now, they're going to point to some Nordic countries. Shut up. By the way, one of the worst mass killing events ever, I believe, was in Norway. That threw off the curve for a long time, where the left said you had to exclude that when dealing with mass shootings. But even in those places, the problems that they face, and if they're not already there at the precipice of the complete decline of their civilization, just give them a decade or two. The left is always wrong. It's that simple. They are always wrong in their proposed solutions.
Yeah, and I think it's even deeper than that with this, because anytime you're trying to solve a problem, you want to get down to like the most common denominator, like we said, right? You want to get down lowest. Saying white guys doesn't really help. Saying black guys doesn't really help. You can't screen for every single white or black person in this. But if you get down to a very small group of people, transgenders, okay, we can make some progress there. We can figure out how to deal with that. If you are interested in actually solving these problems, that's the kind of work that you do.
Yeah.
You don't just say, ban all guns. Can't do that, right? To ban all assault rifles. We can't even define that. But even then, you still have hunting rifles. You still have pistols. You still have shotguns. You still have plenty of other ways. It doesn't really help. You see by the solutions they propose that they don't actually care about the problem. They care about making you scared so that you'll vote for them and vote for control.
Right.
That's exactly what it is. And it pisses me off every time I see it, that this entire situation should be about other things. But it always comes back to this every single time.
If you can look at what would the left do if unfettered? Let's just stack this up and say, okay, we'll play a new game. Is it evil? If the left had their way, meaning no checks and balances on abortion, it would be guaranteed, no doubt, all the way up until and including birth on demand, period. Taxpayer funded. If the left had their way on guns, you wouldn't be able to own guns. People would come in with guns, ironically, to take your guns away, like a mandatory buyback in Australia. Or like you saw, for example, in Canada, where everything was effectively banned and they were demanded to hand them back in.
Yeah.
Look at free speech. If the left had their way, you wouldn't be allowed to speak out against the government, whether it's COVID, whether it's vaccines, whether it's election interference. You wouldn't be allowed to. If you look at energy, you'd be poor. Gas would be expensive. You'd have to use technology that wouldn't provide you dependable energy. We saw this with Germany in comparison to France, who went nuclear. They would be wrong on that with transgender individuals. Kids would be transitioned and taken away from their parents if their parents didn't support it. By the way, they can compete in women's sports. Go through the list. Assisted suicide makes up, 5% of deaths in Canada now? We're saying the same thing. The left wants all of those things. I don't. In places like Canada and many places in Europe, they've gotten those things. Are they better off? They're poorer, dumber, less safe, and less independent. Oh, you're still here watching this on YouTube? There's no more. It's over. Just like YouTube. YouTube is over. It's not a thing anymore. How many Seth Meyers clips do you need? Head on over to Rumble. Follow me there. Live on weekdays at 11 a.m. Eastern, where we can actually speak freely and don't have to self-censor. YouTube it's really not a thing. Like, you ever seen one of those towns that maybe was like a mining town, or maybe they made some kind of alloy? You say, hey, I wonder what they did in this town. It takes a while to find a person who can tell you what they did in that town, and even then you don't fully understand it. That's YouTube. YouTube is that town. So go to Rumble.